A young teacher left for work one morning, but she never made it there. At first, there were almost no clues, no witnesses, no evidence, nothing. Detectives scoured her life, her home, her work, searching for answers. Then, one shocking revelation after another began to emerge. And when the truth finally came to light, it wasn't just a crime. Rachel Del Tondo was born and raised in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, a close-knit town where everyone seemed to know each other. From an early age, she showed determination, intelligence, and a sense of responsibility. Friends and family often described her as outgoing, compassionate, and someone who always had time to help others, whether it was mentoring younger students or volunteering in community events. Her vibrant personality extended into her professional life, where she worked as a high school teacher and took pride in shaping the lives of her students. By 2018, Rachel had built a life full of routines, friendships, and daily responsibilities. She was close to her family, especially her mother, and maintained a wide circle of friends. Yet behind the cheerful smiles and social media posts, there were undercurrents in her life that most people weren't aware of. Work relationships, personal disputes, and social dynamics were all quietly simmering in the background, creating tension that would soon play a devastating role in her life. On a morning in 2018, Rachel left her home like any other day, ready to teach and attend to her professional duties. She was seen by neighbors going about her routine, smiling, chatting briefly with colleagues and friends. But hours later, when she failed to show up at work, alarm bells began ringing. Her absence was unusual. She was punctual, dedicated, and rarely missed a day without notice. Concern grew among her coworkers and family. Police officers were contacted, and detectives quickly began piecing together her last known movements. Investigators started by interviewing neighbors, coworkers, and anyone who might have interacted with her that morning. Security cameras in the vicinity were checked, looking for any signs of her path from home to work, but footage revealed frustratingly little. There were glimpses of her walking, smiling, and seemingly heading to her vehicle, the last confirmed sightings of her alive. As hours turned into a tense day, the community began to fear the worst. Calls came into local police stations with tips, sightings, and theories, but none seemed to hold weight. Investigators were confronted with the challenge of navigating both the emotional toll of a worried community and the pressure to find Rachel before it was too late. Missing person posters went up, social media campaigns began, and the search intensified. Detectives worked tirelessly, canvassing the area, speaking with friends and acquaintances, and following every lead, no matter how small. The more officers dug into Rachel's life, the more complex the situation seemed. Beneath her cheerful demeanor, there were hints of workplace conflicts and personal tensions, nothing that predicted tragedy, but enough to suggest that someone might have had a reason to harm her. With no signs of forced entry or struggle at her home, investigators began to focus on the places she visited, the people she interacted with, and any threats that might have emerged. By the end of the day, the search had spread beyond the neighborhood. Police, volunteers, and family members combed nearby streets, parks, and areas she frequented. Each new tip brought hope and heartbreak when nothing materialized. The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone involved. Every phone call, every message, and every lead became critical. And yet, the mystery of Rachel Del Tondo's disappearance deepened, leaving the community and investigators alike with more questions than answers. Once Rachel Del Tondo was officially reported missing, detectives immediately swung into action. Lieutenant Robert Herchak of the Aliquippa Police Department was assigned to coordinate the search, alongside a dedicated team of officers combing the neighborhood, streets, and surrounding areas. The case quickly drew attention, not only because of the shocking disappearance of a young, vibrant teacher, but also due to the eerie calmness that initially shrouded the scene. Nothing appeared forcibly broken, no obvious signs of struggle at her home, and no direct witnesses pointing to her abduction. Investigators began with the people closest to Rachel: friends, family, Coworkers and students were interviewed to establish a timeline of her last known movements. Each conversation revealed more of her personality, helpful, warm, and diligent, but also hinted at some interpersonal tensions at work and in her social life. Detectives noted that while Rachel was well-liked, the competitive environment of her school and certain personal entanglements could not be entirely ruled out as potential motives. Police officers scoured the areas surrounding her home and the streets she commonly traveled. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras became crucial. Though footage confirmed she left her house and entered her vehicle, it offered little else. The next confirmed sighting of Rachel was nowhere to be found. Investigators meticulously logged every vehicle that passed, every pedestrian observed, and every clue that could possibly be connected. As the hours turned into days, small pieces of evidence began to emerge. Forensic teams examined Rachel's home and vehicle, looking for DNA traces, fingerprints, and other forensic indicators. Though initial tests yielded minimal results, it became clear that something more deliberate might have occurred. The absence of forced entry suggested Rachel may have willingly approached someone she trusted, or someone she knew well. This theory would later guide investigators toward individuals close to her personal and professional life. Meanwhile, detectives followed leads surrounding potential suspects. Early interviews raised red flags. Inconsistent alibis, nervous behavior, and conflicting statements drew attention. Detective Daniel Koffel, assigned to the case, remarked on the unusual tension in certain interactions. While nothing could be confirmed, every detail was scrutinized. Law enforcement began creating a timeline of Rachel's interactions over the previous weeks, cross-referencing phone records, emails, and social media activity. Every anomaly was cataloged as a possible lead. Despite thorough investigative work, progress was slow. The complexity of the case became evident. The crime involved layers of personal relationships, workplace dynamics, and hidden motives. Detectives faced the daunting task of separating gossip and speculation from actionable intelligence. Multiple individuals were considered, interviewed, and then dismissed after careful examination. The case seemed to circle around the community, but concrete evidence remained elusive. At the culmination of this investigative phase, a breakthrough came from surveillance and digital forensics. Logs indicated unusual communication patterns in Rachel's recent messages, revealing interactions that, at first glance, seemed benign, but would later point toward betrayal. This critical discovery set the stage for the revelation at the end of this investigative part. It was only after painstaking cross-referencing of evidence, interviews, and digital trails that investigators identified a suspect whose connections to Rachel Del Tondo were more complex than anyone had imagined. Officer Robert Simpson, who had been involved in her personal life and known to her through work interactions, emerged as the central figure in the unfolding investigation. This revelation shocked colleagues and family alike, as the person who should have been trusted was now under intense scrutiny. The case that had started as a missing person investigation had now evolved into a criminal investigation with a clear suspect in mind. Detectives continued gathering evidence, preparing for the next steps, and navigating the emotional turbulence that came with realizing someone close to Rachel could be responsible. The search for answers was no longer theoretical. It was personal, urgent, and headed toward a shocking confrontation. The investigation into Rachel Del Tondo's death initially seemed straightforward. A promising young woman, tragically gone. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the case began to show its complexity. Early leads that seemed promising quickly fizzled, leaving detectives frustrated and the community on edge. While some individuals were temporarily considered suspects due to proximity or minor inconsistencies in their stories, each was eventually ruled out. These false starts created a growing sense of urgency. As Lieutenant Robert Herchak and Detective Daniel Koffel navigated the delicate balance of following every lead without rushing to judgment. In the early phase, a coworker of Rachel, who had reportedly argued with her days before the disappearance, became a focus. Detectives conducted thorough interviews and reviewed surveillance footage and digital records. Nothing concrete tied this individual to the crime, but the tension it created in the office was palpable. Rumors and speculation began circulating in the community, complicating the investigation further. Families and colleagues felt pressure to cooperate, yet fear of being implicated or of offending someone innocent made some reluctant to speak openly. Meanwhile, the media attention intensified. Local news outlets, aware of the unusual circumstances surrounding the case, reported every possible angle. Some outlets suggested connections to past conflicts, while others speculated on personal relationships. Rachel's family endured an emotional roller coaster, seeing strangers highlighted as potential suspects and constantly fearing for the truth. The public's fascination was intense, yet it often led to dead ends that cost investigators both time and resources. Law enforcement faced another challenge: procedural missteps. In some instances, critical evidence was delayed in processing, and the sheer volume of tips and witness accounts created bottlenecks. Detective Koffel noted how the community's eagerness to help sometimes complicated the case. People came forward with leads, but not all were credible. Some were the result of misunderstandings, jealousy, or rumor. Each misstep required careful examination, which slowed progress and allowed the killer to remain undetected. Compounding the difficulty, some potential witnesses were initially unwilling to cooperate fully. They feared retaliation, professional consequences, or social backlash. Interviews that should have clarified events instead produced vague recollections. For months, detectives felt as though they were chasing shadows. It became clear that while the crime itself was horrific, the layers of human complexity surrounding Rachel's life were equally intricate. Despite these setbacks, the investigation never stalled entirely. Forensic analysts meticulously re-examined digital communications, financial records, and travel logs. Officers retraced Rachel's steps on the day of her disappearance, checking surveillance, traffic data, and even neighborhood video systems that were initially overlooked. Small inconsistencies began to emerge, subtle hints that someone close to Rachel had manipulated information, leaving false trails. A breakthrough came when digital forensics revealed interactions that appeared benign, but, under deeper scrutiny, hinted at hidden motives. Messages and call records were cross-referenced with behavioral patterns, revealing discrepancies in timelines and alibis. This discovery reignited the investigation and forced detectives to refocus on individuals who had previously been dismissed or overlooked. Lieutenant Herchok described this moment as the turning point where suspicion turned into actionable evidence. As investigators delved deeper, the true scope of the betrayal became evident. Someone within Rachel's circle, someone she trusted implicitly, had the opportunity and motive. Connections between workplace tensions, personal relationships, and online interactions began to converge, pointing toward a single figure whose actions had previously been hidden in plain sight. Detectives began piecing together the puzzle. Inconsistencies in statements, unexplained absences, and subtle manipulations painted a chilling picture of premeditation and deceit. The pressure on law enforcement and the community intensified. Months of dead ends had eroded patience, yet the investigation's new direction brought cautious optimism. Every piece of evidence now seemed to reinforce the growing suspicion. Someone known to Rachel, with access to her routine and knowledge of her personal life, had orchestrated events in a way that would mislead investigators for months. At the end of this phase, after countless interviews, re-examinations, and the painstaking sifting of digital and physical evidence, detectives had enough to narrow in on a suspect with a clear motive, opportunity, and history of suspicious behavior. While the arrest had not yet occurred, the turning point was undeniable. The investigation had moved from a chaotic scramble of leads to a focused pursuit of truth. Detectives knew that the next steps would be crucial. The evidence had to be airtight, the timeline precise, and the narrative clear for eventual prosecution. The case, once mired in false leads and public frustration, now had a tangible path forward. The groundwork had been laid for the next phase, where the culmination of years of investigative diligence would finally confront the betrayal that had shocked so many. For Rachel's family, hope and apprehension intertwined, as the community awaited justice for a crime that had tested the limits of patience, skill, and resolve. After months of painstaking investigation, the pieces of the puzzle finally converged. Detectives Daniel Koffel and Lieutenant Robert Herchak had been quietly building a case against the individual whose actions had eluded justice for far too long. Evidence gathered from digital communications, surveillance, and witness statements all pointed to one shocking figure: Michael Eckel, a co-worker of Rachel Del Tondo, whose seemingly ordinary life masked a darker reality. The revelation stunned both law enforcement and the community. The betrayal came from someone who had been a trusted colleague and friend. Michael Eckel's behavior prior to Rachel's death had seemed unremarkable to casual observers, but as detectives meticulously reviewed phone records, emails, and social media interactions, a chilling pattern emerged. Messages that once appeared benign now carried hidden threats and possessive undertones. Forensic experts highlighted inconsistencies in Eckel's alibi, particularly around the time of Rachel's murder. Surveillance footage, when cross-referenced with digital timestamps, revealed him near Rachel's home and the driveway where the tragic events unfolded. Once sufficient evidence was collected, Eckel was brought in for questioning. Initially, he maintained a calm demeanor, denying any involvement. However, under the scrutiny of Detective Koffel and with the mounting digital and forensic evidence, cracks began to appear in his story. Investigators carefully documented every inconsistency, building an airtight case that would stand in court. Lieutenant Herchak emphasized the importance of procedural integrity. Any misstep could allow the suspect to evade justice. The arrest itself was swift but intense. Michael Eckel was taken into custody, and the news sent shockwaves through Pennsylvania. The local community, still grappling with the grief of losing Rachel Del Tondo, was both relieved and horrified. The betrayal by someone so close magnified the tragedy, yet the arrest also offered a glimmer of hope. Justice was finally within reach. The trial that followed became a focal point for the region. Courtrooms were packed as prosecutors meticulously laid out the evidence, step by step. District Attorney Stephen Gordon presented a detailed timeline, showing how Eckel's actions were premeditated and calculated. Key witnesses, including co-workers and friends of Rachel, provided testimony that painted a picture of manipulation, jealousy, and deceit. Surveillance footage, digital records, and forensic reports corroborated their accounts, leaving little room for doubt. Michael Eckel's defense attempted to discredit witnesses and challenge digital evidence, but the prosecution's case was solid. Each claim was countered with meticulous documentation and expert testimony. The narrative that had taken months to construct in the field now played out in the courtroom. Rachel Del Tondo, a young woman full of life and promise, had been the target of an individual driven by obsession and personal vendetta. The jury witnessed the full scope of Eckel's deceit and the painstaking investigative work that had finally unveiled the truth. After days of testimony and deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Michael Eckel was found guilty of the murder of Rachel Del Tondo. The sentence reflected the severity of his actions: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For Rachel's family, the verdict was both a moment of sorrow and closure. While nothing could bring back Rachel, the court's decision affirmed that justice had been served, and the betrayal she endured would not be ignored. The community reaction was profound. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues expressed relief that the long-awaited truth had finally emerged. Local law enforcement received praise for their diligence, patience, and persistence, particularly Detective Koffel and Lieutenant Herchak, whose unwavering commitment had brought the case to resolution. Media coverage highlighted the meticulous work involved, emphasizing that solving such a complex, emotionally charged case required both skill and perseverance. For Rachel's family, the closure allowed them to begin the slow process of healing. Her parents and siblings spoke publicly about the importance of never giving up hope, even when the path seemed obscured by false leads and years of uncertainty. They acknowledged the emotional toll, but expressed gratitude for law enforcement's dedication, noting that the meticulous work had ensured that Rachel's story was told accurately and completely. This case, while tragic, also underscored a broader lesson in investigative persistence. It demonstrated how modern forensic tools, combined with traditional detective work, could ultimately unveil truths hidden behind layers of deception. The arrest and conviction of Michael Eckel were not merely an ending. They were a testament to the painstaking effort required to bring justice to victims and closure to families. As the courtroom emptied and the press dispersed, the lasting impression was clear. Rachel Del Tondo's life, though cut short, was honored through unwavering pursuit of justice. Her story would serve as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of determination for investigators, families, and communities facing the unimaginable aftermath of violent crime. The conviction of Michael Eckel brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to Rachel Del Tondo's family. For her parents, siblings, and close friends, the long, painful wait for justice was finally over. Though nothing could undo the trauma or restore the life of Rachel, the resolution allowed them to begin the slow process of healing. Family members spoke about how the years of uncertainty had taken an emotional toll, sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and the lingering fear that justice might never be served. Yet the conviction provided a sense of validation, a reminder that Rachel's life mattered and that the truth, no matter how delayed, could not remain hidden forever. The community of Pennsylvania also felt the impact deeply. Neighbors, co-workers, and friends who had followed the case closely expressed a mix of grief and relief. Vigils, memorials, and public statements highlighted Rachel's warmth, kindness, and the lasting impression she had left on everyone around her. Her story became more than a cautionary tale. It was a testament to the resilience of families and communities in the face of tragedy. Local advocacy groups even referenced the case in campaigns for stronger protections against workplace harassment and domestic obsession, showing how her legacy continued to create change. Globally, Rachel Del Tondo's case resonated with audiences who had witnessed similar tragic stories. Young women lost to violence, cases prolonged by delays, false leads, or overlooked evidence. Social media and news platforms shared her story widely, illustrating that the struggle for justice is often arduous, complex, and emotionally charged. True crime enthusiasts, law enforcement professionals, and ordinary citizens reflected on the lessons learned. The importance of forensic evidence, the persistence required by detectives, and the devastating impact of betrayal by someone trusted. The Del Tondo family, while still grieving, emphasized that sharing Rachel's story was essential. They hoped it would encourage vigilance, awareness, and compassion for victims of violent crime everywhere. Her life, though tragically shortened, became a symbol of the ongoing fight for justice, a reminder that the truth can prevail even after years of uncertainty. Families of victims across the world facing unresolved cases could draw hope from Rachel's story. That persistence, dedication, and meticulous investigative work can eventually bring answers, closure, and accountability. Yet her case also illuminated a sobering reality. For every case like Rachel Del Tondo's that reaches resolution, countless others remain unsolved, not because killers are invisible, but because the truth was ignored, overlooked, or lost in bureaucracy. These lingering mysteries serve as a stark reminder of the importance of diligence, public awareness, and support for investigative efforts. The conviction of Michael Eckel allowed the Del Tondo family to breathe, mourn, and remember their beloved daughter without the unbearable uncertainty that had haunted them for months. But it also served as a reflection for society, a call to action to address unresolved cases, improve investigative processes, and ensure that justice reaches all victims, no matter how long it takes. As the community, investigators, and families move forward, the story of Rachel Del Tondo endures, both as a cautionary tale and as an inspiring example of how perseverance, combined with forensic science and careful detective work, can finally uncover the truth. Her memory lives on, shaping awareness, inspiring reforms, and reminding the world that every victim deserves justice, no matter how long it takes. How many cases out there are still unsolved, not because the killer was invisible, but because the truth was ignored? Share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.